So, hello everyone. My name's Karina Urquhart and I'm the Executive Director at BIC today and your host for this BIC Brunch session, which some of you will already know forms part of our wider accessibility series of webinars. And today it's on the topic of tackling the backlist mountain, which I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with. So before we get going, the inevitable housekeeping. So just some bits to keep in mind. We'll be asking you, our attendees, to ask questions, but those questions will be answered after all the presentations have been given today. So if you think of anything while the speakers are presenting, just pop it into the question box or the Q&A box, I think it is. Should be a little toolbar at the bottom of your screen, which you might have to hover over, I don't know. Or just use the chat box. But if you could ideally use the Q&A box, that would be really helpful. The event's being recorded today so that we can use it in our marketing and just to let people who weren't able to attend this session today to still enjoy the event later on. But don't worry, no attendees will be identified in the recording. Gentle reminder that BIC is a neutral membership organisation, and as such, we politely ask that all attendees and all speakers avoid any conversations or questions that might be considered commercially sensitive or anti-competitive. And also, please note that the legal bit, please note that this session isn't intended in any way as legal advice, nor can it address business-specific issues. Attendees are all encouraged to seek their own legal counsel. As I've already said, we'll be recording the session, but we'll be sharing the recording later with you all. So probably next week, I think. And with our speaker's permission, we'll hopefully be able to share the slides with you as well. So don't worry if you don't have a chance to make a note of any links that you might see today. So you'll have all that information later. I should also let you know that live captioning is switched on for this event as well. And finally, please feel free to share updates on this session if you want to our Blue Sky account. Our address is on the screen, and we're no longer on Twitter or X. But if you're on Blue Sky, do come and find us. So let's have a little look at the agenda for today. So we've got three speakers lined up for you. We've got Simon Mellons, independent digital publishing consultant and accessibility specialist and co-founder of Page. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Simon, as with our next speaker as well, Stacey Scott, head of accessibility at Taylor and Francis Publishing. And then we have Vika van Rinkhuizen, manager, Kobo and business development books at Bol. And I apologize, Vika, for my atrocious pronunciation. We'll also have a short poll in a little bit, just a bit of fun. It's anonymous, so don't worry. It's just to sort of, get people relaxed, get us sort of into the session, and we'll finish at around 1:30 p.m. So before we get going, a little bit about BIC. So who are we? For those of you who don't know who we are, or you're not familiar with us at all, or you've only ever heard of BIC codes, but you don't really know about us, the organisation, we're a UK-based members organisation at the heart of the book industry, creating standards, best practices and resources. We help organisations become more efficient, save money, become less wasteful, and hopefully, ultimately, greener. We hold a unique position of trust, facilitating UK and international industry-wide collaboration to reach agreement on dependable standards and best practice in the supply chain. We do this in a variety of ways, including running 5 strategic committees, focusing on libraries, metadata, physical, digital, and green supply chains. We offer training, events, and workshops and execute supply chain related projects for and on behalf of our membership and the wider industry. We also operate 3 industry recognised accreditation schemes. Our overarching mission is to create order out of chaos, and you can find a lot more about what we do on our website. So in our session today, as I'm sure you'll be aware, we're going to hear, amongst many other things, practical insights into how publishers can assess, prioritise and remediate their ebook or digital backlist for accessibility, and how booksellers, readers, institutional customers, and even AI can help support this process. We're hoping that this will be a practical discussion, and it's designed really to help you all feel more informed and reach achievable decisions as you continue your accessibility journeys. So before I introduce our first speaker, let's just have a short poll to see how we're all doing, how we're all feeling, what our sort of progress is. So Joe, could you share the first question on the screen, please? So thank you. And as I've said, it's just a bit of fun. No one will be identified. So have you started to tackle your backlist with regards to accessibility requirements? So there's a couple of choices there. Just give it a few minutes while we let those answers come in. Looking good. Are there going to be any changes? Let's see. I think most people have answered. That's probably enough time. So encouragingly, 25%. Oh, Joe, have you shared the results? Do you need to share the results? That's it. There we go. So here's the results that you should be able to see, hopefully, on your screen. So the majority of you are in progress, which is good. Nobody has said that they've completed it, which sort of doesn't surprise me. In a good way, it doesn't surprise me. And no, not started yet. So to those of you that haven't started yet, thank you for your honesty, and really appreciate you giving us that answer there. So a bit of a mixed bag, but the majority of people have either started, or they're starting to consider it, or it's actually in progress. So so that's good news. So if we could do the next question, Joe, don't worry, there's only 2 questions. It's not going to be a whole webinar of questions. So if we could share the next one, Joe. How easy or difficult have you found it? So, and if you haven't started yet, just put haven't not started. That's absolutely fine. So let's see how people are finding it. I wonder if we'll get anyone that says it's extremely easy. There we go. Difficult, extremely difficult seems to be, yeah, kind of as expected, I think. Okay, I think that's everybody. Oh no, there's a few more coming in. Let's give it a few more seconds. That's great. I think we're done. So Joe, if you could share those, please, that would be great. So yeah, 90% saying difficult, 3% saying extremely difficult. So 93% of you are saying it's extremely difficult or extremely difficult. 3% saying it's easy, and 3% not started, as per the previous slide. So yeah, so I don't know what our speakers think, but I don't think there's any surprises there. So thank you for that. So now let's just get rid of that screen. There we go. Okay, so that was good. It's good to see what we're dealing with before we get going. So, but without further ado, I've done enough talking. You're not here to hear me talk. I'm going to hand over to our first speaker today, Simon Mellins. Simon is independent, as I've already said, independent digital publishing consultant and accessibility specialist, and co-founder of Page. He's going to talk to us today about the key differences between EU member states in EAA implementations with regards, and he's also going to talk about grace periods and the differences there, backlist prioritization, main friction points for publishers, uses of AI, and a ton of other stuff. So I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to hand over to you, Simon. So I'm just going to stop sharing, and then hopefully you'll be able to share your screen. Is that working?
Right, let me just share mine again. Hold on a second. All right, is mine showing for you?
It is. It worked in rehearsal and it's working now. So that's
Who'd have thunk it?
so good.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you, Karina, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Hello, everybody. So I'm Simon Mellins, and I'm going to be just giving you the kind of topography of the mountain range we are seeking to explore tonight. Wow, I'm rushing ahead. Now, obviously, I cannot go through everything to do with the backlist and with accessible publishing in the space of this short presentation. But as I said, just the kind of topography over the landscape of what we're dealing with. So, a quick overview of what we'll talk about. So, obviously, publishing's long tail problem, as we all know, more than perhaps any other industry, we have this long tail of content that we perpetually publish, the kind of eternal backlist for a lot of publishers, and how that causes issues with the way that the EAA in particular was written. We'll have a quick look at some national variations in how the EAA as a directive was interpreted and implemented by member states. We'll look at understanding the use of exemption claims and their role in the backlist, and in how you kind of plan your strategy ahead of time. And then how we might use AI to help us. Obviously, we must mention AI in everything 2026. So you've heard a bit about me already. I won't dwell on this for too long, but briefly just to say I'm a digital publishing consultant with over 18 years of experience in digital publishing and specialized in accessibility since about 2017 across all sectors with clients around the world. I co-founded Page, of which Stacey here is the chairperson. I'm the leader of the IPG's CPD accredited accessible digital publishing training course, and that is the kind of full version of the little preview you're going to see today. I'm a member of the Book Machine editorial board and host the digital publishing podcast with the wonderful Simon Holt. And on screen now is a org cloud of various publishers I've worked with, but I think that is enough about me, except to say what I'm not, which is a lawyer. So that's your second disclaimer already, and it's only 12:13. I'm not a lawyer. No one on this, no one or none of our hosts are. So again, we are interpreting legislation here. We're doing it in good faith, and we're using consensus understanding as our guide. This is not to be confused with real legal advice, and you absolutely must consult a responsible legal professional before making any kind of strategy decisions around accessibility. So we'll start at the heart of things, the legal confusion, which is around backlist and this notion of grace periods or transitional periods. The EAA, I think a lot of people here will probably know this, but this is a directive, not a law. So the laws are what member states must write to reflect the directive from the European Commission. And the directive contained this notion of a 5-year transitional period, which is very confusing in a publishing context. They use this term, products used for the provision of a service which were placed on the market before the deadline. Trying to map this product fee services concept or framework onto publishing as an industry is difficult, and you'll find very strident views one way or the other. But the important thing is not what is correct, but rather what member states have made of it and thus written into their actual laws, regardless of whether you feel they got it right or not. In particular, this causes confusion on the backlist, right? To what extent is the backlist considered transitional? To what extent can we put it off? Do we have extra time, or is it exempted altogether? This got interpreted in different ways by different EU member states. So I've highlighted here just a few examples because these represent the spread of different interpretations that are possible. So Finland and Denmark considered everything as a continual service, so there is no distinction of frontlist and backlist, and that means no transitional period. That doesn't mean everything needed to be accessible on day one, but we'll talk about that bit in a moment. France is an outlier in that it legally enshrined this 5-year transition period for backlist ebooks. But of course, if a French publisher relies on this, they then cannot necessarily sell across borders into other member states that didn't make this same unusual distinction. And this is the issue that can come up when we're trying to harmonize legislation across member states, but the directives get interpreted differently. So the whole point of kind of portable law gets a little bit fuzzy. And then you get several nations, including Italy and Germany, who simply transpose the wording of the EAA directive verbatim. right into their own legislation without any additional guidance on what that might mean for backlist. There are industry efforts being made to clarify, and it looks like it's leaning on the Finland-Denmark interpretation rather than the French one, which would mean that you cannot simply say we've got 5 years, so we don't need to look at this yet. It is very unlikely that's going to be considered reliable. And of course, if you're looking to sell around the EU and not just into one member state, then you've got to pick the kind of most generous interpretation to be able to keep files portable. So the key takeaway really is to research the individual member states you want to sell into and how they have interpreted the directive into their legislation. And of course, always consult with your own legal counsel, who are the people actually responsible for making those determinations. You can guide them, you can try and provide some information, but ultimately there will be people who have formal responsibility and indeed liability for those decisions, and they must be involved. We need to spend some time talking about the EAA exemptions. And again, those of you who have attended lots of EAA related talks will be familiar with these. But there is still some confusion, I think, around the way they should be used in a publishing context. So we've got the three core exemption claims that can be made within the EAA. And those are disproportionate burden, fundamental alteration, and the micro-enterprise exemption. The majority of utility for publishing is the first one, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So applying these in a publishing context can be pretty complex just because of the inexact way that the legislation is written and the very diverse range of business models within digital publishing. So this model in the EAA of products and services can get a bit dicey when you're talking about digital books. All exemption claims need to be recorded. So you need to in advance say that you made this decision about a particular title or indeed series, and those decisions are supposed to be reviewed and the statement renewed every 5 years. Quite how that would work in terms of, do you speak to the market surveillance authority, right, the body that's responsible in a particular member state for EAA, or whether you can do it internally is a matter of some debate and is territorially varied. So as I said, the main exemption that will be used, and is already being used by publishers for the EAA, is disproportionate burden. It's important to say that this covers organizational effort as well as financial burden. So sometimes it's hard to cost things in a large organization. And whilst you can often put numbers on it eventually, you can also use organizational effort to make an argument. An honest assessment is needed. You may well have a disproportionate burden claim challenged. It is likely to exempt much of a backlist, particularly of a large publisher, where a lot of things are technically still on sale, but don't sell very often or haven't sold in years. That would be a prime place to use disproportionate burden if you were going to. In terms of how you measure demand and whether something would be quote unquote worth remediating, and I cringe using that language, you can use sales to figure that out. But do not use all-time sales if you are going to do that. It's a really misleading metric because something could have sold very well when it first came out and then nothing at all for a long time. Or you could have had a very recent spike in something that has not sold for years. So it's best to use some kind of recent sales metric or indeed any other kind of demand metric. Make sure recency is borne in mind. Procurement from institutions, if you sell into universities, other types of institutions, can, of course, also indicate demand, even if it doesn't translate to specific unit sales in the same way. You need to frequently reassess this, so log decisions that are made and the date they were made and who made them. Direct requests from readers might well change that demand assessment. If somebody directly asks for it, it will be much harder to argue disproportionate burden because the benefit has been made extremely clear by the person who would very much like to be able to read your publication. So you need to be very direct with them, and you need to be ready to respond to that query and to do something useful with it. And disproportionate burden is not necessarily blanket cover for not remediating a publication at all. It could well be applied per feature. So it might be that some features are disproportionately burdensome, but some are not. We will see when these things actually start to get argued in a real legal context, how that gets applied, but just be aware of that nuance in how it may be applied. Of course, the amount of remediation effort you put in could be scaled based on the demand for a title. But that could also go very wrong if you just do a little bit and somebody is still unable to read the title in the way that they need to. And then the other two exemptions are very rarely applicable in a publishing context. So fundamental alteration sounds like it could be useful, but if you actually start investigating use cases for it in publishing, it's very hard to find them. So broadly, this is where making a publication accessible would profoundly alter its nature. Um, Perhaps, I mean, the test exemption gets brought up a lot here if making something accessible would give away the answer, but there's already a carve out for that in WCAG, so you don't really need to rely on this for that. And perhaps if there's an art publication where reader interpretation is fundamental to the intended experience, then maybe trying to explain all of that in alt text would be a completely different publication. It might be difficult to argue. That might be more of a disproportionate burden argument. And that is often the case when you start to break down a fundamental alteration argument. It often ends up being disproportionate burden. And then the micro enterprise exemption is more straightforward. Fewer than 10 employees and an annual turnover or balance sheet of below 2 million euro. However, if you plan to grow, which most small publishers do, then of course that exemption might stop working once you exceed either of those metrics. So it is a pretty shaky ground on which to build. I also wanted to make the point that there is very rarely a reason to remove a digital publication from sale because of the EAA. There's lots of talk about the chilling effect of this and of publications disappearing. But if your reasoning for not wanting to remediate a title is in good faith, i.e. it is genuinely disproportionately burdensome because it's not selling or whatever, then you use the correct exemption. There are exemptions there for a reason that ought to cover real life situations. So the only reason to take something off sale is if there is demand and it would be worth it, but you just don't want to. If you actually organizationally cannot, you don't have the resources to do it, then that's what disproportionate burden is for. There are ways to signal in the metadata if a publication's subject to an exemption claim or in the queue for accessibility assessment, but hasn't been reached yet. We'll speed through a bit here, but in the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and PS Bar in the UK, there is no notion of backlists. These are all about procurement and distribution. They have affordances for undue burden, but that's something where you'd need to speak to a lawyer. They're harder to apply. The main friction points for publishers are, of course, image description, language tagging, metadata, color contrast, and some of the structuring points. And there are ways to make all of these easier. We do not have time to go through these today, but other speakers will touch on them. But it's just to point out that if you're struggling with any of these on this list, you are not alone. Language tagging would be where there's a word or phrase in a language that is different to the base language of the publication. And it's really important to note that the difference that makes for somebody using screen reader because the wrong text-to-speech voice is used. So very important, but unfortunately quite difficult to do. Often requires an additional proofread. Accessibility metadata, of course, is a challenge. Image description, everyone is challenged by. And color contrast is not very difficult, but if you're doing it after a publication has already been put together, has proven difficult for publishers. Most publishers are using a prioritized approach, which is very straightforward, just deciding on key backlist titles and making them accessible as soon as possible, and then working through everything else over time, unless they're completely relevant, like something that hasn't sold in years. Sometimes that's a good opportunity to realize what doesn't need to be on sale anymore. And then, of course, responding to incoming requests from readers or advocacy groups. Those need to be responded to straight away. Those are your biggest legal risk and your easiest wins for directly making people happy. And finally, we'll just touch on AI. So the potential uses for AI, of course, image description, it's great for doing it quickly. It isn't good at understanding the context of an image a lot of the time. So it might describe it in isolation in a way that makes no sense in the context that the image was actually used in that one publication. There are some models now available that do that better, but be aware of that issue. If you just give it a pile of images with no context, the descriptions will be useless. It also has problems with describing decorative images that didn't need a description. And of course, all the IP risks around AI. So you can use it for image description, but bear all that in mind. Structure and tagging, this is something that's quite difficult for an AI to do. There are lots of subjective or complex decisions about how a publication is structured. So AI can get this wrong. It definitely needs human checks. And then in metadata, the accessibility metadata fields have a lot of mixed types of data and different types of um, analysis that need to be done to fill them out properly. And they can be pretty subjective. So it's quite hard for humans, let alone for AI. And finally, I just wanted to touch on the potential circle of AI that can actually benefit everyone here. Um, AI can be used to enrich content to make it more accessible. And then that rich content works much better with AI. If you've got structure, if you've got image descriptions and everything else, then AI is better able to use the content if you plan on monetizing your content with AI in something like a CAS model, a knowledge as a service model, model context protocol, MCP servers, all of this stuff that's starting to get talked about for different ways of monetizing the intellectual capital of a publisher. AI makes that work better. So you can use AI to make your content more accessible, and then that content works better with AI. If you do it right, there is an awful lot to that do it right part. But again, we don't have time to cover all that now. I just wanted to make that relationship clear. So wrapping up, do not panic. Everyone else is going through this too. Nothing you are facing is likely to be unique to you. So be a part of the conversation. And Page, that we keep mentioning, PAAG, is a fantastic free resource, LinkedIn group, mailing lists, and a website with lots of information at paag.uk. Talk to other publishers. We're all sharing our struggles, and there's all kinds of helpful free information there. If you like my style, then get a much expanded version of all this as my IPG course, which is next held in June. And of course, feel free to get in touch with any accessibility queries. I've put my email address in this deck. It's contact@simonmellons.com. And there's also a big QR code on the screen if that helps. I apologize for running slightly over, but that's me.
No need to apologize. All very useful information. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
I think you're really good. Well, all good points. But one that sort of stood out for me was the recency of sales. Just being careful that you're, like you said, you're not giving the whole life history of the book and the sales. You're doing you're arriving at a particular point. I mean, do you have any sort of tips for how to arrive at that? I guess it would depend on each book, each business, each, I guess just a snapshot, more recent snapshot. Or
the typical use case would be something like a book based on a TV show that was current when it came out, so it sold hugely, and then they kept it on sale because, of course, digital warehousing is cheap or almost nil. So they kept it on sale, but actually no one has bought the In-Betweeners yearbook in however many years or whatever. If something has gotten out of vogue. So it's really simple, actually, in that regard, just taking sales over a given relevant recent period rather than looking at lifetime sales. Lifetime sales can really put your effort in the wrong place.
Yeah, definitely. And interesting, there's no distinction in the ADA or the PSBAR for backlist either. So, that's a good point to call out there.
Yeah, those are all about procurement. So there isn't any, it doesn't matter when it was published, right? Those are about what you procure to give to people.
What you're procuring. Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Lots more to say, but we can talk about things in the Q&A, hopefully. And the biggest, another takeaway was do not panic. So yeah, that's important. So thank you, Simon. I'm going to hand over to Stacey now, if I may. So our next speaker is Stacey Scott, Head of Accessibility, Taylor and Francis Publishing. Stacey's going to talk to us today about the challenges of the backlist from the publisher's perspective. So how are Taylor and Francis prioritizing their backlist? Have there been any changes or what are the sort of optimized workflows and process transformation that happened as a result of looking at the backlist and how to prioritize and manage? A bit on technology and tools, reaching the end user, how to measure success, and much more. So I will say over to you, Stacey, in a minute. If you can just bear with me while I get the slides shared, that would be great. So let me just get those up for you. And then I'm just going to check that that people can actually see that. So Simon, can you see that okay?
Yes.
All right. Excellent.
Perfect.
Excellent. So it worked in rehearsal and it worked live as well. So that's always a positive. Brilliant. So I'm going to shut up now and going to hand over to Stacey. So the floor is yours, Stacey. Just let me know when you want me to change the slides.
I will. Thank you so much, Karina, and thank you to BIC for having me speak to you today. As mentioned, my name is Stacey Scott, and I'm Head of Accessibility for Taylor and Francis Publishing. I am also chair of the Publishing Accessibility Action Group, which has been mentioned, and it's completely free. We have an online meeting next week, so please, all of you are welcome to join us. Do get in touch or go to the website. So today, I'd also like to talk to you from both a professional and a personal point of view, as I have lived experience as someone who is completely blind, and so who really does. I'm one of these people. I really do rely on you making your digital content fully accessible. So I'll talk a little bit about that threaded through the talk as well. But I want to talk to you, as Karina mentioned, about some of the challenges, but also the opportunities when we're looking at the backlist beast, this big mountain, as well as some key practical takeaways and some food for thought, as well as looking at some of the processes and strategies that Taylor and Francis have put in place to tackle that backlist. But first, next slide. Setting the scene, so the scale of the challenge. So whether is it Everest or is it Ben Nevis? I can tell you it matters not to me. I would not climb either of those. But certainly for a lot of us, and for Taylor and Francis, we're not starting from zero. We're starting from volume. So for us, we have 180,000 EPUBs, over 4,500 journals, and so no panicking, 5.6 million journal articles. We're not panicking. And we're expected to publish 180,000 journal articles this year alone. And we also have vast amounts of ancillary content, which I'll cover later, but that could be data sets, multimedia, videos, slides, assessments, etc. Of course, accessibility expectations are accelerating, which is a good thing. It is a good thing. As a result of a lot of legal drivers, as Simon mentioned, the European Accessibility Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act Title II, but also some commercial drivers as well, institutional procurement and contract renewals. So the reality is, I think a lot of people expect me to say, as a blind person, make everything accessible to us now. Actually, the reality is full remediation of everything is not achievable tomorrow. It will be achievable, but it's not going to happen overnight. And therefore, it becomes a prioritization strategy challenge, not just a technical one. Next slide, please. So the budget and resource reality, I'm sure we're all familiar with these, but let's go through them together as a team. So the constraints, there are many. I'm just going to talk about some of the highlights. So obviously the cost per title slash article. How much will it cost you to remediate that book or article, to put in the alt text, etc. Internal versus vendor capacity. So who's available to do the work? What resources do we actually have to get this done? Um, Backlist volume, of course. How large is it? Whether or not you've got 10,000 books, but a handful of staff, or 180,000 books. Backlist volume is obviously one of the key things to consider. And of course, internal buy-in can be a challenge, making sure that you're running accessibility up that flagpole and that your executive leadership team understand the importance of it, both from a moral imperative, but also from a business perspective as well. Do you go for any trade-offs in when you're thinking about your backlist? So is depth versus breadth, good enough versus perfect? Remediating one book brilliantly because it's a high seller, or doing a little bit across 10,000 books because you think, that's going to cover more ground. I would say somewhere in the middle of that, which we'll talk about from going through this today. So certainly for us, we decided to focus on, and Simon's covered a few of these, so high impact content. So the content that, as Simon mentioned, hasn't sold once or for a short time, but is consistently selling and reaching a high volume of customers. The second is by customer request, and this is a really important one to us. What do customers need from us? And so we have set up a mailbox so customers can get to us immediately. And I know EBSCO have done the same. So actually, EBSCO now have a button pretty much everywhere. I think it's on every sort of article and every page. It's very prominent, and it says, "I need this in a different format," or "I need it remediated," and it comes straight through to us and any other publisher they work with. We also focus on a broad range of subject matters. So this is really important to us because what we could have done is say, well, let's get all of our HSS or health and social science content that doesn't have a lot of pictures, and we're already using EPUB. It'll be quick and easy, and we can, that done. So we have done that, but what we didn't want to do is neglect STEM content. Now, STEM I call science, technology, engineering, math, medicine, and music because of STEM, because it does now involve all of those. We have blind people now studying medicine because publishers like you make your content accessible. And so again, that's a huge driver for that backlist as well. Speaking of drivers, so if you think about the opportunities, it's not all uphill, it's not all up mountains. Sometimes you get those nice flat bits that you can catch your breath on. There's a definite opportunity to demonstrate return of investment through your accessibility work. You contract retention, so people coming back to you, signing large contracts because you can confirm that you are offering a fully accessible experience for their students. Obviously, there's competitor advantage attached to that, wider market access, and of course, just reputation. Do you want to be the publisher who wants your customers to have full access? Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned earlier, ancillary content, that hidden complexity, is often overlooked actually, but for us, we thought it was critical, and it's been a key area for us and actually also for our customers. So, ancillary content is typically content that comes alongside an ebook. So it can be slide decks, instructor materials, multimedia such as videos, podcasts, and interactive content, and a variety of other things. So this poses quite a few challenges because there's a wide range of formats, as you've just heard, and a wide range of owners as well. It's often created outside of central workflows, so embedding it in business as usual processes can be tricky. Our approach at Taylor and Francis to this has been to first assess what file types do we typically have. So what are the most common file types that we want to tackle first? And then to define minimum accessibility standards for each of those file types. So we know exactly where we want to get to. So even if we can't address it all right now, we have a plan going forward. And assessing the complexity of those formats versus timeline and impact. So do we have some formats actually that are really difficult to make accessible and hardly anyone's using them? Or do we have some that actually are really easy to make accessible and so we should focus on those first? And so it's a bit of a mixture between looking at what's being used and what's being asked for. The same as what's being done for our ebooks and our journals based on prioritizing the high use and requests by customers. And then finally, just making sure that you provide guidance to content creators if if ancillaries are being created outside of your processes or indeed your publishing house, making sure that they have the guidance. So you're saying these are our minimum standards that we expect for accessibility, like you would do with a vendor and an EPUB, for example. Next slide, please. So reframing the problem, and I think this is really important, and it touches on what Simon said about, we've not to be scared by this. We've discussed the challenges, so we know where we stand. We know what some of the difficulties are, and we just need to start the trek. Let's start going up that mountain. We know it'll take a while, it'll be difficult, but there is a top, and I think that's key. So for us, we wanted to look at going from a fix everything to a maximize impact approach. So having a can-do approach can actually get you quite far. So you're not becoming overwhelmed, letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. So moving away from binary thinking like accessibility versus non-accessible and making it more part of a process that's seeing accessibility grow and happen and mature over time. So we decided to focus on key areas. So we thought about risk reduction. So that's looking at legal and contracts. So that we very much leave to our legal team, as has been mentioned. Looking at are we heading towards compliance for things like the EAA or Title II of the ADA in terms of what institutions expect from us. Um, Listening to our customers, again, mentioned, it is a big one for us. What are we getting requests for? Is there a specific journal or series of books that we see being requested for more in terms of remediation or image descriptions more than others? So making sure that we're keeping mindful and storing all of that information and data. So what do customers need? What are they asking for? But also in terms of what are they asking for? Are they mostly asking for image descriptions? Are they mostly asking for remediation? And if so, what can we learn from those lessons? So for example, if you have a piece of content and you're constantly being asked, actually, I need this in an EPUB. I need this in an EPUB. Then it might be time to start looking at changing your processes. Um, I think one of the key things here, and again, I've mentioned it, this is important for myself and literally millions of others, is focus on what accessible content actually opens up for your customers in terms of life choices, education, lifestyle, work, independence, in, financial freedom. It doesn't just stop when you put the book out. It can actually change a person's life. So if I didn't have access to digital content, I wouldn't have the education I have, and I wouldn't be talking to you now. So focusing sometimes on that end goal and really making it person-centered, even when it's difficult, can just help sort of remind you as to why you're doing it, why you're having that sleepless night. But also focusing on, because it's helpful for ELT, focusing on what accessibility brings to the business. Uh, Accessibility never brings anything bad to an end user, and it certainly brings a lot of good, a lot of income, and a lot of good vibes to your publishing house as well, as we've mentioned. And by doing all of these things, for us, accessibility then becomes a continuous program, a measurable maturity journey, not just a one-off costly remediation exercise, but part of business as usual processes. And this basically leads it to reducing extra resources needed when it all starts to blend together. So not having accessibility costing a lot of money at the side because actually it's all just cooked in a big pot with everything that you're providing your customers. Next slide, please. So understanding the backlist was a big one for us. So again, looking at, doing a content audit, gap analysis. So what formats are you using? Is it EPUB, PDF, HTML? Where are you starting from? Um, for us, what you don't need to do, and again, check with your legal expert. If you sell, for example, EPUBs and PDFs, so you have one book and it's available in both EPUB and PDF, you don't need to make both that EPUB and that PDF fully 100% accessible. You can choose one of those as your fully accessible format. So we have a lot of PDFs and a lot of them are in really good condition and really good accessibility wise. However, if you want something that's 100% accessible, that's our EPUBs. So we focus on our EPUB 3s and making them fully accessible. And we remediate PDFs on an on-demand or by customer request basis. It's always worth noticing the complexity levels of things. So, for example, again, I mentioned, HSS versus STEM. Is it highly textual or is it very visual? And perhaps would need a lot more resource in terms of image descriptions. Another thing to note is actually sometimes you would be surprised when you sit down to do this bit of analysis and you think, oh gosh, there's a lot. We've got so much content. And then you realize you're actually most of the way there. And we've spoken to so many publishers like this where they think they've got a lot of work to do and they show us some content and you say, oh no, this is brilliant. All you have to, you've got an EPUB, you've got hierarchical structure and headings, you've got your alt text, and maybe you just need one or two tweaks. And they were 99% of the way there and panicking, and they were pretty much done. And so just, yeah, really getting that understanding of where you are in that process. You may actually be quite pleasantly surprised. Metadata gaps obviously need to be mentioned. Lack of accessibility data will let you down in the end because people aren't going to know you're hiding your light under a bushel. You've done all that work and you're not telling anybody actually these books are fully accessible, or someone's coming to you and asking you to remediate, and you say, well, actually, we've already put these titles up in accessible form. You just haven't let anybody know. And also, it makes having it in your metadata can make it more discoverable as well. And then finally, a challenge, inconsistent historical workflows, different vendors, standards, levels of quality. It's always worth making sure that you're aware of any of those sort of difficulties and looking towards streamlining a process. Next slide, please. So what should be prioritized? We've mentioned a lot of this. So for Taylor and Francis, certainly, again, we talk about high value content, core value textbooks, high adoption course materials, frequently accessed journal articles, on-demand content being a big one for us by request from by a customer. And again, making that process easy. So having a link everywhere, basically everywhere, saying, I need an alternative format. And certainly for us, it takes you to a form that says, okay, is it a book, is it a journal, or is it an ancillary material? So that it can get to the right person immediately. And then having a clear, SLA in place so that people know they can expect, when they can expect to have that remediated file back in their hands. And if there's a bit of a challenge there, just making sure that you're, keeping in touch with that customer, discovering what they need, managing their expectations. It really shows your dedication to accessibility. Looking at high risk content, so content tied to high value institutional contracts is a big one. Quite often you'll see, we'll sign our next contract with you if all of your content is accessible. Absolutely, because particularly in the United States, because the institutions do not want to absorb any outcomes or negative impact from the publisher not providing what they should be, which is the fully accessible content. Also, content that's been flagged in accessibility audits or internally or externally. So, for example, the WebAIM survey that's just come out again. It comes out each year, highlights I think it's the top 1 million homepages and how many of those are accessible and what accessibility score they get. And several of our homepages were in there, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of publishers for whom that's also the case. And actually, customers look at that, they see that, and they make decisions based on that. Okay, next slide, please. So workflow and process transformation. So after you've done your analysis and you've established what you have and where you need to go, so shifting from more of a reactive to systematic workflow was a huge thing for us. So basically, we prioritize, remediate, validate, and release. We embed accessibility into conversion workflows, QA processes, vendor requirements, standardizing, making sure we have clear specifications so that we're all aligned, we're all on the same page, both internally and when we talk to our vendors. So we're working to WCAG 2.2, but also, and this doesn't get mentioned, I think, enough in publishing sectors when we're talking about accessibility. If you're using EPUB, you should also be working to the EPUB 1.1 accessibility specifications. So please don't just talk about working to WCAG. You also need to be working to those specifications. And also, there's, of course, your metadata from schema.org and looking at code list 196 for accessibility metadata. Of course, Simon mentioned automation versus human in the loop. So automating where possible is absolutely helpful, whether that's ensuring that using some automated software to basically put in some hierarchy, putting in some headings with a good structure and the appropriate hierarchy can turn an EPUB, for example, into this is barely usable to this is a great experience. Using validation tools, if available to you, that will flag to you any book that comes through a process that doesn't have alt text where there's an image or doesn't have image description where it should be. Of course, using human intervention where necessary. Typically, this is good for, again, especially alt text and image descriptions, especially for complex content like STEM. And finally, closing those feedback loops. So continuous engagement and improvement across all teams. So making sure that you're working together as a unit, as an accessibility working group or team, rather than as individuals. Next slide, please. So tech and tools. So again, benefit of automation for us, it was a big, huge part of it has been using AI to generate some image descriptions whilst keeping a human in the loop to assure for quality and check that it is appropriately aligned with the text that's surrounding it. Scalable metadata generation. We again having an automated tool that helps us generate that and also put it where it needs to be in terms of display has been extremely helpful as well. Using it at scale certainly is a definite highlight use of automation. Of course, there are limits. We're not all singing from the same sheet when it comes to AI, and that's absolutely fine. AI cannot assess, meaning, context, or quality, and so again, having that human in the loop to say, "Yep, this image description is adequate," or "No, this one has definitely not portrayed this image at all appropriately," is extremely important. Um, Integration, so again, embedding tools into business as usual processes rather than treating accessibility separately, as I've already mentioned. But I think the key message here is technology enables scale, but doesn't replace human expertise. But it does continue to grow and develop and can certainly do a lot of the heavy lifting. Next slide, please. Reaching the end user, hugely important. Accessibility is only meaningful if it works for real users. So some of the challenges is there's quite a bit of distance between publishers and the end users. Because of this, there can be assumptions about user needs. What format do they prefer? What do they actually need? Are these colors appropriate? Because you can base it off WCAG, but also basing it off human experiences is just as valuable. So some solutions around this, join the group. So, join the Publishing Accessibility Action Group. There are a lot of people on there from all across the industry, from publishing into colleges and institutions, and of course, end users. You be very available, as I've said, make sure that customers know how to reach you, how to have that conversation with you, tell you what they need, and manage that expectation with your service level agreement. Communicate with the customer at every stage so that they understand that you are taking this seriously and you're as much dedicated to their accessibility needs as you are to any other customer. And partner with other institutions like RNIB Bookshare, Bookshare US, or the Accessible Books Consortium so that you can get your accessible content out there in as many places as possible so people can reach your content. And then finally, just thinking beyond compliance. So again, usability is another key thing that we talk about. So you may comply to WCAG standards, you may comply to EPUB specs, but actually how user friendly is it? What's the experience like? Is it effective? You need that customer informed design. And so bear in mind that your end user, your customer is your ultimate subject matter expert when it comes to accessibility. So having focus groups and getting their engagement and feedback is really important. And I would say that's particularly important if you're going to use AI to tackle some of your backlist. I would say to have real users say, this AI has been effective, this AI is what I need, it is useful, is going to be a huge stamp on your, AI journey. Next slide, please. So just quickly on gathering data and feedback and closing that loop. So, building structured data and feedback gathering mechanisms. So again, we mentioned user testing groups, KPIs, we must talk about key performance indicators, We have it come from customer services, a legal, request mailbox, Bookshare channels. So how many customers are we seeing come through and ask for remediation requests or image descriptions? What are they asking for? And really tracking that data to inform, both qualitative and quantitatively what we do going forward. So refining prioritization, improving the workflows, guiding future investment, evidencing the need for resource, yes, but also evidencing the opportunities for the business and the return of investment. Next slide, please. So measuring progress and success, again, very important. So define what it looks like. Track the percentage of backlist that's been made fully accessible. Have you reached your goal? If not, do you need to rethink either, your goal or the sticking point? Coverage of high content and subject areas. So are you covering what you hope to cover in terms of the high touch point areas? Have you seen a reduction in the number of complaints or remediation requests? And then finally, when you get that feedback, making sure that it's communicated internally to continue to secure the resources, the investment, but also the buy-in from all staff, and externally communicating it to inform and build trust and relationships with your customers, but also other publishers, supporting other publishers and stakeholders within the industry as well. And we really love to do that when it comes to accessibility. There's very little competition when it comes to that, and you certainly see that if you're a member of Page. Next slide, please. Culture and ownership. So accessibility is not an island. So who owns it anyway? So, actually everybody owns it and it can't sit with one team alone. And so when you get everybody involved, when it becomes part of their objectives, then it makes it a lot easier. Again, everybody should carry the weight and the weight becomes a lot less on their shoulders. So whether or not that's editorial engagement, technology alignment, product ownership, ensuring that you've got clear accountability, shared responsibility, that leads to a lot of opportunities. So, it positions accessibility as quality standard, a commercial enabler, providing equal access for all, which I think we can all agree is the ultimate end goal. Next slide, please. So, final thought from me, from backlog slog to momentum. The backlog is not just a problem. It's an opportunity to rethink and update existing publisher workflows, a chance to embed accessibility at scale, an opportunity to maximize your content for everybody. Remember, accessibility never disadvantages anyone. The goal is not perfection overnight. As we've mentioned, the goal is sustainable progress, measurable impact, and better outcome for users. So I would say if there was three key actions that you could do now, you could go away and take with you and start to discuss in your publishing houses. Set up your clear customer contact method, the mailbox that I keep going on about for your journals, your books, your ancillaries. Review and prioritize that backlist. As I've mentioned, what have you got? Where do you need to be? What do you need to do? And finally, as part of that, develop a realistic roadmap for remediation because getting started and showing a plan will take you so much further than just saying, oh, well, actually, we found it a bit overwhelming, so we haven't started yet. That's everything from me. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Stacey, for such a comprehensive presentation today. Those numbers were quite startling, 5.6 million articles.
Yes.
And I just love the fact that you're not panicking with those
We're
numbers.
not panicking. No,
That's
we're
brilliant.
fine.
Not
We're
panic,
fine.
not panic. Um, Things that came out for me was have a plan. If you can't do it now, that's okay. You don't need to be binary about this. The importance of the end user is coming through, and we're gonna hear more of that from Vika in a minute. And just really understanding your current position, where you're starting from. It may not be as bad as you think. And also really important third-party guidance. So are your suppliers, are all your third parties that you're using, are they on board? Are they, following the same message, the same sort of protocols, the same agenda and strategy as you? And if they're not, how can you get them on board? So I think that, yeah, and loads more in there. I've very badly summarized. So apologies, but thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
And I'm going to move over now to, let me just stop sharing first of all. There we go. I'm just going to hand over now to Vika van Rinkhuizen. And again, apologies if the pronunciation is terrible. As already mentioned, Vika is manager Kobo and business development books at Bol, and he's going to talk to us today about, well, one of the many things he's going to talk to us about today is legislation variation. So we had a bit of that, quite a lot of that from Simon, but Vika's going to focus in on Netherlands versus UK specifically. It's going to talk a bit about what their initial focus was with this Backlist Mountain, the importance of enabling and facilitating an informed buying decision or downloading or subscribing decision. And we're going to hear about their research on consumer feedback or the end user needs via their various working groups and much more. So over to you, Vika. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karina, and also to BIC for having me. I've put my slides up on the screen.
Yes.
So my name is Wieger van Rinkhuizen, dialing in from the Netherlands from bol.com, or Bol as we call ourselves nowadays. So we have a wonderful marketing department who thought it was a good idea to skip the com part of our logo. So we call ourselves Bol. And just before we get started, so on the next slide, I have noticed that in the chat and in the Q&A, it's still quite quiet over there. So we wanted to get you thinking on this question. So where do you think lies the biggest stretch in terms of accessibility? And I'll try and put it in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone can see this, but please feel free during the session to comment on that either via the chat or the Q&A, and we will see and hear your views on it. Just a little bit about myself. So I'm responsible for, as we call it, or as I call it, I'm a bit biased there, but we call it our most exciting e-commerce proposition from Bol, which is our digital reading proposition that we do partnered with Kobo. And we've been focused over the past year a lot on building an accessible journey there. And the statement that we think is most important there is really the end in mind should not be compliancy, but it should be allowing users to make an informed decision and then actually being able to purchase and use an accessible ebook. Just a brief overview. So I'll talk a little bit about Bol, about the Dutch approach that we have with the collective working group, and then I'll move on towards goals and timelines, and also in the end, with an eye on time, because I see we also need to keep some time for the Q&A. I'll show you our current consumer journey and also the user feedback that we've got. And with that, I hope to give you a good perspective from a bookseller. So just briefly, for those of you who don't know Bol or Bol.com, we started in 1999. We've become the largest online retailer in the Netherlands. And we still are today the largest bookseller in the Netherlands as well. We've partnered up with Kobo in 2014 for digital reading. We've also launched Kobo Plus, our reading subscription together. And the past year, we've been very focused on launching this accessible ebook journey. We have a lot of employees, a lot of customers, and we are still very proud of our heritage in books. And then just to give you a bit of an overview of the approach from the Dutch market. So we've partnered up with multiple parties, so being both booksellers from Kobo, Bol, also the library, towards publishers, and also the publisher group organization from the Netherlands, which is called the GAU. Centraal Boekhuis, for those of you who don't know, they're facilitating the shipment of physical books, but also the metadata of digital books in the Netherlands. And of course, we have the regulating body in the Netherlands for the Accessibility Act, which is the Commissariat for the Media. And together with these parties, we've been discussing a lot the steps we can take on accessibility, also in line with with basically this main objective, which really is having meaningful and consistent accessibility metadata for users to make an informed decision. And to give you a bit of an overview there, so we've basically put this into different phases, and the main goal is really to get newly released ebooks fully accessible. And there we look at the WCAG standards, and we've together with all the parties I've just discussed, and also the regulating body, we've determined like which genres need to be fully accessible. And just basically put, you can distinguish there between books and genres which we say they have to become fully accessible. And those are, for example, text-heavy books such as fiction. We have a group for, we say it has to be as accessible as possible. And there you can say, for example, specific non-fiction books or fantasy books that are heavy on images or graphs. They have to be as accessible as possible. And then a third group, which we say, well, mostly fixed layout books, such as children's books, they are exempt from this legislation. And this approach has been agreed with all parties, and we've been following this ever since. There's also specific things we've discussed for Backlist. So we've said in the Netherlands, we've created a group of successful Backlist, which is ebooks that over the past 2 years have generated more than 4,000 euros of revenues. And if books do not fall in either of these categories, they can be considered exemptions, which is also does also apply for, as Simon shared, for example, to micro enterprises. So this approach it's helped us a lot to know like where to go and where to put our focus. I'll very briefly show you this timeline. So we've been very focused on getting these requirements also aligned with the regulating body. We're now really in a phase where we are educating the market, both on the bookseller side, but also specifically on the publisher side. And we have certain moments in time where we want to have this accessibility metadata mandatory. And you also see that we have a point in time for backlist accessibility. So briefly, the current status, we see that well, of course, the law came into effect June 25, and we see that publishers are really starting to publish also accessibility metadata and publish in accessible formats. But we also see that specifically also in the mandatory categories, we do get metadata in, but the number of books that are sufficiently accessible, the percentage, it's still too low. And also the quality of input. So, for example, accessibility summaries, some tend to be in English, some tend to be in Dutch. There's just different levels of quality of this being filled in. So still quite some. We've made some great progress, but there's still a long way to go. But what I've mainly wanted to do today is just show you how we've implemented this on our website to really give you a bookseller's perspective. So that this is our website, and let's say you were browsing for an ebook, and you might end up on our, which we call our list page, and this could be either through the on-site navigation, or you could reach it via search, and there you will see. So this is just a very cut off screenshot of our website. You typically see a view where you see, let's say, the first 10 ebooks on page 1, and there we have our filtering on the left hand side, which a lot of users use to get to their decision. And this can be either on category or genre, or it can be anything else for price or discount. But we've also included there now, does this book have accessibility information? So it either says yes, it does have accessibility information, or it says there's no information available, or it's limited, the level of accessibility. And we see actually users using this now to filter on it and to get to books that they can really distinguish for having at least some information on accessibility towards full accessible formats. And then, so let's say you've clicked this filter, then you will end up on a product detail page for example, of this book. And if you go a bit lower on this page, you will find the accessibility information that we have on this book. So this will give you key characteristics such as, like, does it have a table of contents navigation? Does it have alt text? Is it in a reflowable format? So those are the key. There is more specific information down there. Also, the summary is provided, and we see that at least for all the books where we have this information, it is actively being found by users and used to make their decision. So what we've also done, which we found particularly interesting, is we've taken this information and our current journey to actual users. So we've had a working session with partly or fully visually impaired consumers who attended at Bol. You see a screenshot here. This is not a screenshot from a book's journey, but you get the drift. So this is a user who is using a screen navigation tool and is trying to navigate our website as such. And we've learned loads of interesting things from this session. So that already by seeing someone navigate using the screen reader, we've noticed there's just so much information on our website, and it's very difficult to navigate from, let's say, the header of our page or the first filters or the first categories that we show towards really the book, and then in the end also towards like letting users know that there's accessibility information available, yes or no, for this book. So there's a lot to learn, and I'll also get into that a little bit on the next slide on improving the navigation and the use of headings on our site. We've also noticed, so if people navigate to a product detail page, there is, as I've just shown you, quite a bit of information there. And I think from a metadata perspective, what we're showing currently, it's not the only metadata that is available. We've already made a selection, but still the feedback we got was that this information, it is still quite a lot. And we've noticed that the people who attended this session said at some point, we just would like your thoughts on is the level of accessibility, maybe put it into 3 simple categories for us to know, like, is this worth a try for us, yes or no. And we've noticed that they also, from looking at other journeys from other places where they can buy or purchase a book, they always have to take a leap of faith on having at least some information and think, okay, let's give it a go. But when they get too much information, they tend to get confused. And also, we've noticed that many of these users do have a go-to store for accessible purchasing. So, and this is something that we also need to create awareness on, being a bookseller, and maybe even using the Bol homepage and the library that's available there to actually tell that we have an accessible journey and that you can find this information on our website. So having these workshops, I think there's several companies that specialize in organizing these, and it's really encouraged to have them, quite low effort and high reward, I'd say. So then, what's our focus and next step? So we are focused on really educating publishers. So the biggest Dutch publishers, they are really on board with this approach. And we see let's say the more medium-sized ones, there's still a lot of work to be done. So we hope to get the fill rates and the accessibility levels up for at least this year, the front list, and then the coming years, the backlist. But we also have said we want a minimum level for all books, which means also if they are partly accessible or not accessible, we at least expect publishers to fill this information so that we can inform our customers. And for now, we're not blocking any books from our website. We just want to make sure that we can have as much information as possible for this informed decision. And then in terms of our consumer journey, so I've already mentioned the navigation headers and the accessibility library, which are invisible parts of our website, but they can become really useful to navigate quicker. And then we have the visible part, which is just making sure that there's less information and that we provide a simple rating or categories that users can trust. And then also this awareness part. So we've learned a lot. We're also actively passing on this feedback to the rest of the market, and we're very happy with the approach that we have there, and working together with all the other booksellers, publishers, and the working group. So that in terms of time, we're doing quite okay. But just to end, for us, this is really about not focusing on becoming compliant, but just having getting a chance to have as many consumers as possible make an informed decision, and there we think we can play a huge role. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have time, and I see Karina also reposted the question, but I'm afraid, Karina, that I couldn't get the chat to send the message also out to the full group. But
don't worry,
through the chat or
it's
Q&A, please let us know.
It's not you, it's us. I think so. Yeah, I've just been trying to fix that. So somebody very kindly drew that to our attention that it's not. I don't think it was enabled for attendees. But anyway, hopefully they can see that now, and hopefully we'll get some answers coming through. I think Joe might be looking at this as well for us. But yes, thank you for your presentation there, Vika. I just thought it was interesting that the emphasis that you're putting onto those user groups and that feedback that you're getting from your end users, your readers, etc. And really interesting as well about the too much information can be off-putting. I guess when you were sort of referring more to the sort of the layout and the presentation of the web page rather than the information about an actual book.
I think it's both. So
both, okay.
What we need to be doing over time is just getting the feedback from users, getting it to publishers, and together deciding on which metadata fields are most important to fill out. So there's still a lot to learn there, but happy with where we stand today.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And also, it was really good to see that you're in that sort of informing and educating phase as well. So you're not doing this work in isolation. You're sort of reaching out to people further up and down from you in the supply chain, which I think is really important as well. So thank you for that. So if you could stop sharing, I will then just share my screen, if I may. Just a little, thank you. Just a little reminder that we're now going to go into our Q&A session. Hopefully you can see that box. I'll take it off in a minute. It was just so I'm hoping that the Q&A box will work. It seems to be. So let me stop sharing that now. Let's have a little look and see. Okay, so we're comments really at the moment rather than questions. So we've got, I think regulation will ultimately be the most challenging to maintain. And that that sort of brings me to a question I'd made a note of as well. Is just it would be quite good just if we can just very quickly just remind people of what to do if the countries that you're selling into are all interpreting the regulation, whether that's the EAA or AN other, differently. I think Simon, you touched on this, and also Pico, you did more specifically between the UK and the Netherlands. So Simon, did you want to answer that? Go for that first off.
Yeah, it really depends on if you're looking to sell to a narrow range or even a single EU member state, in which case you just need to look at what their legislation is, and of course keep up to date if that changes. And I realize that can be difficult to do. Page, again, is a good resource for legislative change, but there are other ones. Laney Feingold keeps a really good list of legislation. Inclusive Publishing from Daisy has a list as well. So there are lists out there that show the changing legislation. But if you're looking for specific nations, then that's your route. However, if you want the ability to make kind of pan-European sales, then there isn't really any point. You have to take the strictest approach of any of those members to be able to sell everywhere. So that doesn't mean 100% of your catalog would somehow need to be instantaneously made accessible. Again, you have time to do this, and disproportionate burden might also include saying, right now that is disproportionate, but we've scheduled it in. It's part of our roadmap. As Stacey indicated, showing intention, showing a roadmap, really valuable in a legislative situation. These laws are not here as a gotcha. It's here to encourage publishers in the right direction. And if you show you're making progress, I think you're likely to find that helpful. Of course, it's not legal advice, and we don't know what regulators will ultimately be like in these situations, but that seems sensible. It is certainly what the publishing lawyers who have spoken publicly about this have indicated. So in short, if specific nations, look at their specific legislation, but if you just want to sell across Europe, then you have to take the kind of broad interpretation that there is no such thing as digital backlist in that sense.
Mm-hmm. And Vika, did you have anything to add to that?
No, the main thing I'd say is that it's just important to stay in touch with the local publishers, the local governing body, and trying to determine what is progress, and as long as we are progressing towards a more accessible formats, more accessible journeys, that I think that the progress is mainly rewarded, and the end is always a bit unclear.
Yeah, and the end isn't, as you've all said, the end isn't, well, one of the ends, but it's not the sole end. The sole end isn't to comply with the legislation. It's to provide an experience for the user that is enabling them to make an informed decision about whether to purchase, whether to not, whether to subscribe, whether to not, whether to, and just understanding what content is available to them, and making sure, as Stacey said, that, we're not just thinking about even that, we're thinking about the lifestyle, the education, the interests, the sort of the impact that all of this has on that user, that reader, who may have accessibility requirements. So that's really important as well. It's just not a box ticking exercise. And that it's BAU, that it's embedded in part of everyday workflows as well.
Sorry, Karina, just to add to that, that's using the metadata to express where something is not accessible, or whether you haven't yet assessed it. That's why that's so important. We're not just trying to meet people's needs, we're also being honest about where a publication doesn't, instead of wasting someone's time. And you can even use that to indicate, we know it's not accessible, we see this, we're not blind to it, we are going to work on it, and it will get there, we're just not there yet. You can indicate all of this.
And you're saying that we're not ignoring this, we know about this, but and I think as well, sorry, I will go on and on, and I need to focus on the questions that are coming in. Sorry to everyone who's asking a question. I do have a habit of talking. Yes, what are considered reasonable SLAs regarding remediation in regard to timelines, especially? Now, I guess this will depend on your own organization, your own preferred ways of working, your own customers, your own et cetera, but is there a middle of a Venn diagram here that we might be able to talk to for this question? Who wants to go first? Simon, you're looking like you want to go first.
I mean, the point is, I suppose none of us want to answer that, because there's no legal precedent to base an answer on. We haven't got any test cases to base that answer on. So that number, you might find the Market Surveillance Authority that was nominated for a specific EU member state might have set one. But that's the way to find that out. There's certainly, I would never venture to guess a recommended one, because if that's wrong, I don't want to be legally responsible for that.
I think for us, we base, again, this is what I was talking about, gathering your data, because we base it a lot on what are we experiencing in the past. And so our SLA for anything says we aim to do it between 1 and 3 days. but it depends on the content. And so, for example, if they just need, EPUB to Word, that's relatively quick and simple. But actually, if a book is a STEM book or STEM MM book and it needs converting, the images need to be described, then it's going to take longer. And again, this is why I talk about making sure that you've got that line, that contact with your customer, you're managing their expectations, and you're staying in touch with them, so they're not thinking, oh, I should have had my book, 3 weeks ago and no one's been in touch with me. Again, just making sure that you set those expectations, have an SLA, but you can be quite honest in your SLA and say, well, this is the ideal, but it depends on what level of remediation and accessibility alterations are needed.
Yeah, thank you. Next question. Any pragmatic tips on easing the burden on creating alt text and language tagging in the backlist mountain? As a scholarly publisher, we have many languages and many complex figures and images, especially language tagging, since I have seen far less advice on how to approach this versus alt text. Who wants to go first? Stacey, was that a breath?
Well, I kind of feel like it should come to me, but to be honest, it's particularly the language tagging side of things. It sits within our sort of books team, and we have an absolute genius that works on it, and it is not me. And so, in terms of the technical answer to a lot of that, I'm certainly happy for you to reach out, and I can connect you with them, and we can have that conversation.
Oh, wow.
We'd be more than happy to help where we can in that regard, because yeah, we get a lot of that as well, and it's certainly something that he and I discuss a lot.
Thank you. That's
Yeah,
very generous, Stacey. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
we're happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, thank you. Simon, did you look like again be wanting to say?
There isn't a magic bullet with language tagging except for editorial process when the book is first being set. That is more of a challenge with backlist because again, the only way, unless there's something in the InDesign files, the only way to do it is with the proofread. You know, the concept of using AI for it is certainly appealing. Very challenging, particularly in English, which is full of borrowed words from other languages. So figuring out when something actually genuinely is in another language and needs a different voice versus a word that we now use commonly in English that you would not change a voice for. It's a difficult problem for AI. Automation certainly can't do it in the old-fashioned sense. You can't just check against the dictionary because again of these borrowed words in English. So it is difficult. For frontlist, it's make editorial processes include that. There are plenty of proofreads done on a new publication, or there ought to be. So catching those needs to just be a standard process part. But for backlist, it really is a case of it's difficult, and there is no magic solution to it other than some vendors will claim to use AI for it and just check the quality and check how well they're doing it. But that's a really tough problem. And image description, I think, was in that question as well. And again, AI struggles with the context part of that, as a few of us have mentioned, but things are improving. As with all things AI, keeping abreast of the news is really important, making sure you're not giving an opinion based on the reality of months ago or even days ago. Things change rapidly. So keep abreast of how that changes. God help us, we'll need to listen to lots of vendor pitches. I know that can get that can be very time consuming and not always the most fun thing to do, but do hear them out and ask them tough questions, because the difference in quality between these AI accessibility products is crucial to people's end experience, and there's such variation.
Yeah, and if I could just add a tiny bit to that, it may sound obvious, but always give them something to test against. Don't
Oh yeah.
Yeah, give them your stuff. Have your own expectation set rather than here's something we made earlier.
Yeah, perfectly curated
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Tip. Very good tip. Thank you. Next question. As a primarily fiction, similar but different question, I guess. As a primarily fiction publisher, alt text can be challenging to generate without disrupting the flow text. Would you err more on the side of too much rather than too little description in the alt text? I'm going to go to Vika for this in light of his too much information may put people off observation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is a difficult one for me to answer. So I think so what I was speaking to is really the information that we provide before the sale, or so I'm not really speaking on behalf of like the actual contents of the book. What we see in our on our website, for example, so the alt text that we show on the images that we portray of a book, or uh, we see that specifically it helps to note like the level of importance of an image, and so for example for the cover image on the website, we have a more elaborate alt text versus the other images of the book that we show, because otherwise if you were to read this our website using a screen reader, and I'm unfortunately not that experienced myself, but you do get like long alt text for every image, and it takes you like maybe 5 minutes to have all the information and make your decision. So we tend to say, okay, some images are more important than others. I think that's useful.
Okay.
Karina, can I just
Stacey can, yep.
Yes, sorry, Stacey. Thank you, Vika. Stacey.
Sorry, Vika. I just wanted to add, I think it's really important to talk about the difference between alt text and extended descriptions, because alt text is typically hidden and you would have a set number of words for that, say maybe 30, 40. It's typically set by the publisher. And then for anything more complex, that's an extended description. And that can be put as, as footers, or actually is collapsible and expandable within a book itself. And I think we just say alt text a lot, and I think sometimes I've seen examples where the alt text is like 200 words. And bear in mind that actually screen readers cannot interrogate alt text when it's in the back end, and that's when you need the extended descriptions, because the you can actually interact with them, read word by word, line by line for more complex subject matters.
Yeah. Thank you. I am conscious that we are out of time. We're 2 minutes over. So are my speakers still okay, or do you need to
Yeah.
jump off?
Yeah.
We do have two more questions, so I'm just going to whiz through them if I may. And apologies for those attendees that need to jump off, but you will get a link to the recording. So hopefully that's okay with you. So the first one I'm going to go to is, have you encountered a disconnect between usable accessibility and compliance accessibility? Perhaps where the customer's accessibility experts are satisfied, but the legal team is a bit wary of something that's not 100% compliant. So I guess it's if your users are saying this is great, but maybe it's not actually, inverted commas, legally compliant. Has that ever come up, or is it not so much of an issue, or any thoughts, or too early to tell?
I've not seen that one.
I've never seen that. I don't know.
No, so I can take it from a perspective of so our internal legal team, which is fully focused on compliancy, and the current journey that we have, where as I've shown you, let's say 30% of the ebooks, newly published ebooks, are fully accessible. So this has also been a matter of discussions and education internally. So looking at it purely from a legal standpoint, we would have to block 70% of the books from our website. But I don't think that's like in the end the goal that we want to achieve, being like with our mission of putting as many books as we can out there for people to continue reading it, or maybe even read even more. So that this has been an ongoing conversation with our legal team, but also with the regulating body, and saying, okay, we want to really take steps towards a more accessible journey, but we cannot do so as of day one. And thinking there in the discussion, there's always room for, like as I said, progress, showing progress together, instead of having like a very tough decision on blocking non-accessible books, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Last one. Do you have any suggestions on how to make fonts in an EPUB as future-proof as possible? So I think that this question is around evolving fonts. If fonts change, etc., that may have an impact. Is that something that you've come up against, or is that it's obviously something that this attendee has come up against? So And I can't sort of read it any more than that without potentially being commercially sensitive, I'm afraid. But so in general terms, are there any suggestions on how to enable fonts or keep fonts in an EPUB as future-proof as possible? Or is that beyond our sort of capabilities at this point? Difficult one, potentially.
I guess the idea that if you going back to the backlist and you discover that a font has had its license changed or something.
Yeah, possibly. Or maybe or maybe the design has changed, or yeah, maybe it's not, maybe the font isn't accessible because it wasn't when you first originally looked at that title.
Hmm. I'm happy to discuss this one with the person asking it
Yeah,
separately if they'd like. I think we probably need more details on that one.
Yeah. All right. So just to that person then, if you want to get in touch either with Simon directly or with just with us at BIC, we can forward that on to Simon. So yeah. So that would be great. Thank you for that, Simon. So I think that's all the questions. Let me just check. You're pretty much there. Don't you think we managed to resolve the chat box? Or did we? You just have a quick check.
No, apparently it couldn't be enabled during the session, but
Well, we don't. Yeah, I thought that was deliberate.
Okay.
Thank you to whoever
All right.
applause reacted.
Yeah, that was good. So let me just share my screen again just for the final few slides. Here we go. So just check you can see my slide.
Yes.
Yes, the reason we keep asking is because this is only the second webinar that we've used Zoom on. So apologies for all the, can you see my screen? Can you see my screen questions? We'll get better as we go forwards. So we've come to the end of the session. Sorry, we ran a little bit over, but I thought it was important to keep going because there was some very, very useful information from all of our presenters there and some really good questions coming through as well. So I just wanted to alert everyone that we have a YouTube channel. We have a lot of videos on there. They're free to watch. I think we've got over 40 or so. And it includes the dedicated dedicated playlists for accessibility. And also, for those of you that might be interested, the theme sessions as well is also another dedicated playlist. And we have all sorts of recordings on there, including sessions on sustainability, etc., and more sort of general topics as well. So that's just a little FYI for you. And then really, it's just to say massive thank you to our speakers today, to Vika, to Simon, and to Stacey. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your time in the preparation. And I'm so pleased all the technical elements work. So that's a relief. So thank you. Oh, lots of clapping hands and thumbs up. We like that. That's nice. So yeah, thank you for that. At the risk of repeating myself, we'll send a link to the recording of the whole webinar to you ASAP, probably next week. And with our speaker's permission, which I will check in on, we'll hopefully make the presentation slides available for you as well. It'll be on our YouTube channel as well in about a month or so's time. And that's it. So yeah, and finally, thank you to all of our attendees today. Thank you all for coming along. Thank you for sticking with us because I know we ran over. And I think that's everything. I'm just checking my list. Do I need to say anything else? No. You can find out everything we do on our website. You can join our mailing list if you want to keep up to date with other events, other webinars, other resources, etc., etc. So yeah, so we hope to see you at another BIC event soon. And until then, take care and hope you enjoyed the session today.